The candlelight trembled like it knew a secret. Rain tapped the window with the patience of a friend who refuses to leave. He stood with a match halfway to the wick when she touched his wrist and, with a small, tired smile, whispered, "This is my last birthday." The match went out. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed and faded. He didn't ask, why, or how, or, are you sure? He simply inhaled, decided, and said the 5 words that would rewrite the night, then let me make it unforgettable. Her name was Amina, and she kept her life folded the way you fold a letter you've read too many times, soft at the edges, careful in the corners. She loved lists, groceries, chores, books to read, apologies to make. She loved plants that didn't demand much, socks without holes, and quiet mornings where the kettle took a little too long to boil. She loved Adam, most of all, Adam of the shaken open umbrella, of the always too loud laugh, of the clumsy hands that somehow fixed anything that broke. Adam, who was there the day the doctor said, aggressive and uncertain and, will try. Illness turns the ordinary into glass. You see through everything until faces look like mosaics, until a birthday cake is a clock counting down. Amina had held her courage like a candle on a windy street for months. Tests, treatment, the arithmetic of hope and side effects. The calendar thinned. The world grew smaller, the bedroom, then the kitchen, then the balcony with its flustered sparrows. She had started to measure days in good hours and bad hours, and this one had been good enough for a bath and a dress she hadn't worn since last spring. When she said, "This is my last birthday," she meant it in that careful, complicated way sick people mean things. She meant, I don't want to keep pretending I have time I might not have. She meant, I need to be brave enough to say goodbye to the versions of myself I can't be anymore. She meant, if this is the last candle, I'll watch it melt all the way down without looking away, but Adam heard it differently. He heard a door closing that he wasn't ready to accept. He brushed the unlit candle crumbs from the table, pressed his thumb to her palm, and felt how small the world had gotten. Unforgettable, he had said, like a promise to the air. Then he moved like the rain had been waiting for this moment to stop. He grabbed his phone. He started calling. First, he rang Dottie, the grandmother who hadn't spoken to Amina since a disagreement over tradition at their wedding, 7 years of silence built on stubbornness, an inheritance neither of them wanted to pass down. No answer. He tried again. This time, a crackle, a cautious hello. "Dottie, it's Adam," he said, voice thin with urgency. "It's Amina's birthday. She thinks it might be her last. Will you come?" Next, he texted Maya, the best friend who drifted out of orbit when life got busy and texts turned into polite, soon-s. He messaged Rashid, the neighbor who always mowed his side of the grass one stripe into their yard, as if generosity needed borders. He called his mother, who loved to feed sorrow until it fell asleep. He called the owner of Café Saffron, where Amina used to write grocery lists and dreams in a notebook with a lilac cover. "Can you open just for an hour?" he asked. "Just tonight. I know it's late." He didn't know that people say yes to love like it's a door you've been waiting to knock on. He didn't know that Maya had been staring at a half-written apology for months. He didn't know that Dottie had a photo of Amina on her dresser, face turned away whenever she dusted. He didn't know that Café Saffron's owner, Mr. Hamid, had been saving the lilac notebook in a drawer since the day Amina forgot it on the table, pages crowded with recipes she never tried. He found scissors, string, and old photographs. He cut and strung and taped them across the living room wall like garlands of time, Amina and her sister with ice cream smiles, Amina at the river, hair wet to the shoulders, Amina asleep on the couch, cheek creased by a paperback. He placed her slippers in the doorway with the care of someone who understood that small comforts were kingdoms. He put the kettle on, then changed his mind and made lemonade, sharp, cold, like a shout you could drink. The first knock came slow, almost apologetic. It was Maya, eyes rimmed with sleeplessness, hands full of sunflowers because lilies felt too prophetic. She stood on the doormat like a question. "Amina," she said, voice breaking open. I should have come sooner. Amina, who had learned that anger is often just grief with its sleeves rolled up, stepped forward and pressed their foreheads together like they did at 17 when secrets felt too heavy. You came now, she said. That's enough. The second knock belonged to Rashid and his wife, bringing a cake that was more frosting than cake, the kind children dream of. Behind them came Mr. Hamid with a paper bag that smelled like cardamom and cinnamon, and the lilac notebook, shy in his hands. You left this, he said, and Amina's face folded, not with sorrow but with the relief of finding a misplaced part of herself. He had bookmarked a page where she'd written, untried recipes are just invitations waiting for a brave guest. More knocks. Neighbors with folding chairs. A cousin with a guitar she barely remembered how to play. A teenager from 2 floors down with a camera, offering to take pictures, the way your memories feel, not the way they look. The living room filled with the clumsy choreography of people who had remembered, all at once, how to be a community. At 8, the rain paused like it was listening. The door opened again. Dottie stood there with a shawl wrapped tight and the pride of a long habit turned fragile. Her eyes went first to the floor, then to Amina, then back to the floor. And then, unexpectedly, beautifully, she bent, so slowly it looked like a prayer learning to walk, and touched Amina's feet. Forgive an old woman, she murmured. I let rules get louder than love. There are words you think you'll need when that moment finally comes. Speeches you practice while chopping onions, apologies that change shape over the years. But sometimes all you can manage are the plain things. Stay, Amina said. Stay and have cake with us. They didn't sing when the candle was lit. Instead, Adam tied a ribbon around Amina's wrist, not too tight, like a promise instead of a cuff. No birthday songs, he said. Tonight is a story. All of us. The story of you. So they told it, the time she got lost in the library at 6 and emerged hours later with a pocketful of words, the day she learned to ride a bicycle and crashed into a hedge, then stood up crowned in leaves. The job she left because it asked for her bone marrow and called it ambition, the summer she and Maya ate mangoes on the roof and decided to taste everything life offered at least once. Every story made another hand reach for hers. Every laugh turned the room soft. Every silence gave the air somewhere to rest. Amina listened like someone drinking water after a long walk. She felt full in a way the medicines never promised. She understood that this was what Adam had meant, not more time, but thicker time. Not more days, but a day with so many rooms you could live in it for years. The bench was 3 blocks away under a street lamp that always flickered, as if undecided. It was where they'd sat years ago, knees touching, when Adam had asked, on a Tuesday that smelled like rain and petrol, if her hands could be his home. Tonight, the bench wore a surprise, someone had draped it in a ridiculous velvet cloth like a throne. On the seat lay a Polaroid camera and a note. Take pictures whenever you feel a moment arrive. Don't wait until later. Later is a rumor. Amina held the camera up and took a photo of their feet side by side, the kind of picture that won't win awards but will save a day. She took another of Dottie scolding the flickering light with a finger raised like a conductor. She took one of Maya and the teenager arranging the velvet so it didn't get damp, of Mr. Hamid pretending to be a king. Each click was a small refusal to vanish. The tree wasn't a tree anymore, just a stump sprouting stubborn green from gray bark. Years ago, developers had come with their measuring tapes and promises. Amina had loved that tree, not for its shade but for its habit of catching her breath when she passed. Around the stump, Adam had hidden little paper leaves on strings. Each leaf bore a sentence from friends and strangers who'd answered his rushed texts. You taught me that kindness can be practical. Your laugh made my coffee taste better. You don't know me, but I saw you help a man with his bags last winter. You smiled the way. A porch light smiles. Amina didn't cry when she read them. She did something better, she breathed like the world had widened. She tied the leaves back to the stump, and the stump stood there like a secret garden had decided to begin. The door with the blue paint belonged to the school where Amina had once volunteered. She had taught a handful of kids to read the way you teach someone to whistle, by letting them play until sound turned into music. Tonight, the children were there with chalk dusty on their fingers and a surprise on the pavement, a hopscotch grid that stretched farther than any hopscotch had a right to stretch, squares filled with words instead of numbers, brave, curious, messy, kind. You told us words are steps, one girl said, hair in 2 fizzing braids. We made a way you can walk. Amina, whose bones had started to negotiate every movement, looked at the endless chalk path and shook her head, smiling. I'll walk it with my eyes, she said, and she did. Stepping from brave to curious to messy to kind until she reached home, written in swirled letters that looked like they were trying not to cry. At the river bend, Dawn's rumor was still hours away. The water kept its own counsel. Floating at the bank were candle boats, small folded papers waxed to hold a flame. Adam knelt, wobbling, lit one, and set it adrift. For the things we can't carry, he said. Amina lit one too. She thought about everything she could not take with her if the worst happened, the plant with leaves like tiny hands, the scent of the light shop in winter, the particular slant of afternoon in their kitchen. She realized how much of her was in other people now, how their stories held her, how her kindness had been busy without her watching. She let the candle go, and it moved away like a sentence ending in a period that felt, somehow, like a breath. The light shop was their joke. A narrow store that sold lamps and bulbs and shades and tiny glass beads that caught the sun and flung it back across the world. It smelled like warm dust and electric dreams. The owner, a woman with hair like a halo trying to be a storm, had taped a sign to the glass, "Close your eyes before you come in." They did. Inside, the shop was lit only by a ceiling full of paper stars. They swayed as if someone had just sighed. Pick one, the owner said. Write something you want to keep, even if you can't keep everything. The stars had little pockets. Amina took a pen and wrote, I want to keep the way he looks at me when he thinks I don't see. She slid it into the star and watched it tremble, then settle, like a heartbeat calmed by a palm. By the time they climbed the stairs to the rooftop, the city had decided to be generous. Clouds parted. The night showed its throat. Up there, a projector tossed old moments against a sheet clipped to a clothesline, not recordings. Adam hadn't had time, but still photos from the garlands, from the bench, from the chalk hopscotch turned into a
गुलाम हैं रसूल के गुलाम हैं रसूल के गुलाम हैं गुलामी रसूल में मौत भी कबूल है जो हो ना इश्क मुस्तफा तो जिंदगी फजूल है गुलाम है रसूल के गुलाम है मिलके पढ़े गुलाम है रसूल के गुलाम है पढ़े दुरूद आप पर मिली ज़बां इसीलिए पढ़े दुरूद आप पर मिली ज़बां इसीलिए फिदा हो उनके दीन पर है तन में जा इसीलिए फिदा हो उनके दीन पर है तन में जा इसीलिए जो उसके वास्ते नहीं वो जिंदगी फजूल है जो उसके वास्ते नहीं वो जिंदगी फजूल है गुलामी रसूल में मौत भी कबूल है गुलाम है रसूल के गुलाम हैं, गुलाम हैं, गुलाम हैं, रसूल के गुलाम हैं। डला है उसके रंग में करीब उसके जो गया, डला है उसके रंग में करीब उसके जो गया, मिला जो एक बार उसे गुलाम उसका हो गया, मिला जो एक बार उसे गुलाम उसका हो गया। वो ऐसा खुश बयान है, वो ऐसा खुश असूल है, गुलामी रसूल में मौत भी कबूल है, गुलाम है, गुलाम है, रसूल के गुलाम है, गुलाम है, गुलाम है, रसूल के गुलाम है।
When they finally went downstairs, the house smelled like cardamom and lemon and something new, relief that didn't pretend to be certainty. A week later, Amina went to the hospital for more tests. The results were neither miracle nor disaster. There was treatment to try, discomfort to manage, unknowns to sit with like cats who visit when they please. They returned home not with triumph but with clarity. That night, she opened the lilac notebook and wrote a new list, not of chores or groceries, but of lasts she wanted to claim and firsts she refused to surrender. Last time I apologize for needing help. Last time I measure my life by my productivity. Last time fear gets the first word. First morning I choose the balcony even if it's cold. First afternoon I read poems aloud to the plants. First evening I ask for the story of someone else's day as if it's a novel. They stuck the map on the fridge. They visited the bench on Tuesdays and the riverbend on days that pressed too hard. They went to the light shop once a month, adding new slips to their star until it chattered with hopes like a pocket full of coins. They walked past the blue door and watched children hop from curious to kind, and it felt like watching time forget to be cruel. And on the next birthday, that phrase she'd once said like a door slamming, Amina didn't whisper about lastness. She cut a mango on the roof with Maya and wore a ridiculous hat and opened a photo book that made her laugh snort. She turned toward Adam, who still shook open umbrellas like they might bite, and she said, "It's my first birthday after the last birthday." He nodded, understanding. Because last had turned out to mean something different than they feared. It meant the last of their old ways of holding life at a distance. It meant the last of shrinking to fit inside days that weren't built for them. It meant the last of pretending that love had to be quiet to be dignified. There were still doctor visits, still tired afternoons, still cupboards to argue over. But there was also the ribbon, now faded, still tied to her wrist, still whispering when she moved. There were paper squares replaced as old vows matured. "I'll bring 2 stories on Mondays. I'll add bread to the soup. I'll teach you how to use this camera properly. I will keep my corrections to my knitting." Unforgettable, it turned out, was not a night. It was the practice of looking at each other like the world was a house you could renovate together. It was choosing thick time over long time, choosing truthful vows over heroic promises, choosing to call the future a mystery and mean it with a grin that if you were watching their story on a screen, maybe you'd expect sweeping orchestras and miracle cures and declarations shouted in the rain. Instead, you'd see a man rinsing mint leaves for tea while a woman reads a poem to a stubborn plant. You'd see 2 people walking slower than the city, one holding a shoulder, the other holding a bag of oranges. You'd see a bench that looks like a throne because of who sits on it, and a rooftop where a sheet claps in the wind like an audience that refuses to leave. You'd hear, if you listened, the softest hook repeating in every scene, the thing Adam learned the night she said, "last," the thing Amina decided to believe, that unforgettable is not about how long you have, but how deeply you let the minutes root in you. That even when the candle burns low, you can still pass the light from one cupped hand to another, steady as breath. And in the final shot, the camera would close on her wrist, ribbon fluttering with new vows, her hand tightening around his as the sky decides, once again, to be generous. The words would land gently, not as an ending but as an invitation, let's make this one count, too.